Hello, on this Tuesday/Wednesday edition of Travelin' Young, we just got a new lease, so it's time to finally talk about cars. We're the Youngs.
We've spent our lives traveling the world,
and in 2018 we moved from
Chicago, Illinois to
Copenhagen, Denmark.
Now we want to share with you
how our new lives abroad
is keeping us young.
Keeping us young.
Are helping to keep us young. We're back, and as I mentioned, today we're going to talk about cars. We recently leased a new car, turned in our old lease, got a new one, a Nissan Juke, and I wanted to talk about that process. And I have to thank the folks at Autohuset Vestergaard in Niram, because we went through the whole process of figuring out what the lease would be. After that, I said, hey, I've got this YouTube channel. What would the same vehicle cost if I bought it? And they were kind enough to help me understand a bit what the taxes and registration fees and all that stuff would be if I bought the car. So I'd have that information today. So thank you for helping me with that. And that gives me some stuff to talk about. First of all, I do need to say, I'm going to compare living in Chicago, or the suburbs of Chicago, to living in the suburbs of Copenhagen here in Lyngby. I'm not going to talk about what it's like to live in the South in the U.S. or in the West in the U.S. or live in Jutland, because I don't have those experiences, and I recognize the needs of somebody in those places will be different. But I'm going to talk from my personal experience of living in the suburbs of Chicago compared to the suburbs of Copenhagen as I do right now, and the type of cars that we had. So from a driving perspective, I will say, because people have asked what it's like to drive here versus in the U.S., it's not that different, but I've also driven not in Denmark before I lived here, but in Europe quite a bit, and I know how to drive a manual shift. So does Miranda. So driving a manual wasn't a big deal. You know, it was a little bit to get used to kilometers versus miles per hour when your speed. There are a couple rule differences, like you can take a right on red in most places in the U.S. and you can't here, so that took a little bit to get used to, because turning right in a red light would be nice. But and also a lot of the bikes was tough here in Copenhagen, because you take a right turn, we got to wait for a bunch of bikes to go by, and that's something that makes me super nervous, and I'm not used to that. But otherwise, it's not that different. People behave basically the same, and it wasn't a huge adjustment just being able to drive here. But one thing that was a bit of adjustment was the cost of gasoline, and so I want to mention that to start with, because everybody talks about that. I'm not going to all the details on what the specific taxes are on gas. I recognize that there's first a cost for the gas, and then there's various taxes applied to that. I'm not going to get into all those details. I'm going to talk about the final cost in the end, because in the U.S. there are also some gas taxes as well. While not as great as they are here, there still are gas taxes too, and it's super tricky to get into all that stuff. But if I talk about the final cost, currently right now, where I lived in Illinois, it would cost 5.35 Danish krone per liter. Now in the U.S. it's by gallons, but I converted that to liters for that price. To fill up the Nissan Juke, and there's like a bug going in front of the camera, sorry for that. Lots of bugs now because it's super hot and the windows are open. To fill up the Nissan Juke that we just got, it'd be around 270 Danish krone in the US to completely fill up the tank, all the space. In Denmark, it's 13.2-ish Danish krone per liter, which is around 659, 660 Danish krone for the entire tank of gas. So that means right now in Denmark, it's around 2.4 times more expensive to fill up a tank of gas than it is in the US. That's definitely a huge difference. I will make one point though. For me, having lived in the US and worked through a budget and what it means to live in the US, and what I'd spend per month in gasoline, it's actually a little bit, maybe it's similar to what I paid in the US, because I had two cars and I had a car that was much bigger and used more gas. And so from a budget perspective, which I know wouldn't be applicable to somebody who's never lived in the US and lived off a budget in the US, or another country outside of Denmark maybe that costs a little less for gas. But for me, when I think of, what do I spend as an expense for driving my car, for having my car, for food and all the other things, I'm not spending collectively more money here because I'm driving shorter distances for sure, so I'm not using as much gas, and my car is not as fuel efficient, or was more fuel efficient here than it was in the US, a bigger car, and I had two cars that I was filling up because Miranda and I were often going different directions. So from that perspective, from a budget expenses standpoint, for me moving here, it wasn't a big increase. But then if you look at what I'm paying, obviously every time I fill it up, I'm definitely paying more money for sure. And it encourages me to actually drive less and use my bike more and take public transit, which is why I'm not spending as much in gas per month or around the same. So that's gas. Definitely more expensive, but how much I consume is less. So for me at least, moving from one place to another, it wasn't a big difference collectively. Now, another difference is I'm leasing the car here instead of purchasing it. And a lease. So if I leased the Juke, here it was around 10,000 krona down payment. It's around 3,500 krona per month. And then there's the 600 krona every 6 months for tax. I think that's what this new car is going to be because I've gotten one tax bill already. That means over the course of the 3 years, I'm paying around 136,000 krona to lease this car, or 21,600 US dollars for the 3 years here in Denmark. So for a equivalent car, because the Juke is not in the US, I'm going to talk about the Kicks, which is similar. Best thing I could find to get me the closest comparison. They seem like similar cars when I look at them. Looking at the same features, I would pay the same in a down payment in the US, and then around 1,800 krona per month to lease that car. And then over the 3 years, I'd pay 75,000 krona to lease it, or 12,000 US dollars. So that means, comparing the 136,000 krona to 75,000 krona, that means I'm spending 80% more to lease the same car in the US. The same car in Denmark as I would in the US. Absolutely more expensive because of the registration tax and all those things. Now, the leasing helps a little bit because of the formulas and what they use. That brings it down compared to buying the car. But yeah, it's definitely more expensive. But again, from a lifestyle perspective and how I, as an American moving here, budget and think about it a little bit, well, we have only one car here versus two cars. So I'd be effectively paying more for two cars in the US if one of them isn't paid off. And there were definitely times when we were leasing one car and paying for another one. So it's pretty common to have at least one car payment, and sometimes you might have two. We definitely had two a couple times. So in those situations, I would have been paying more per month because I would have had two cars instead of one. And also the car I would say that it's common, at least for us, we'd have one kind of, errand car that wouldn't be as big to go to the grocery store and run short trips. And then we'd have a bigger car for the long trips because we'd sometimes drive 12 hours to go somewhere to visit family, and we'd want a bigger car. So that also means it's probably a more expensive car because it's bigger and different, and we want it to be more comfortable. So I wouldn't have the equivalent cars, I think. Certainly when I compare the vehicles I had in the US to here, a car like the Kicks or the Juke would probably be like a kind of a kick around utility car at home and not my main family car, where here that's the only car I have. So I just bring this up because I think it's important to recognize that when you live somewhere different, you culturally would potentially have a different vehicle. You'd have a different life situation. So even though I lived in a similar distance from a major city, I still had two cars, one bigger and one smaller, which would mean my monthly expense for car payments, if I'm paying for two simultaneously, would absolutely be more. And I was always paying for at least one, and that one might be a little bit more in the US compared to the calculations I showed here, because I'd probably have a different type of vehicle compared to what I have here. Where here, we've just kind of adopted a different style of car. We're not as interested in having the nicest, bestest car. We just need a car that takes us where we need. It works. It's definitely good. I like this new car, by the way, the Nissan Juke. I like it better than the one I had before. But, we've adjusted kind of like our lifestyle and how we have a relationship with cars compared to what we did in the US. So we're making different decisions, which means we're conceding and having a car that might not be as expensive or bigger. And that changes the dynamic, of course, if I think about what my monthly expense for car would be for lease. But absolutely 100%, it's 80% more here versus what it'd be in the US. But it's also worth considering you might make different decisions because culturally and lifestyle, the US might not be the same, and that could lead you to something different. So I'm going to stop there for the moment because it's not Tuesday, it's Wednesday, but in In the future, when this video is viewed, it might not be realized that it's not Tuesday, but I'm posting it on a Wednesday, but I still have tried on Tuesday with my friend from Norway who was visiting yesterday. So let's go to that. So welcome to a very special Trot on Tuesday today, where I have my friend and coworker Martin visiting from
Norway.
Norway, yes. You live very far up north in Norway.
Wow, central Norway.
I mean, to me, it's
to you, yeah, and in most of the world.
Yeah. And it seems like you'd have to be dependent on beer because it's just you, beer, and who? I mean, what else? Are there people there?
There are people, but not many.
Yeah, very good.
It does get lonely.
So I thought it would be fun to have Martin try some American beer, which amazingly enough, I was able to find in Denmark, which I don't understand, to be completely honest, because this is not good beer at all. Despite being called the king of beers, it's not good beer. I don't know why a Dane would ever drink this, but I'm going to make you drink it.
Wow.
And you're not a Dane, you're Norwegian.
I am.
So here we are. This is going to be a Budweiser, king of beer, that Martin here is going to try. React any way that you wish.
Yeah.
I would not drink this.
You wouldn't drink it.
So I'm hoping you enjoy it so you can drink the other 5 that I bought in order to get this one. But here, I'm going to let you open it and have the full experience.
This is pretty exciting.
King of beers.
Yes, the king of beers. It's a bold claim.
Oh man, now I feel like you just like mowed a lawn and you're just opening that beer.
Yeah, it's a pretty good sound.
Yeah.
So far, so good.
Is there any taste?
There's no taste.
Is it just like bubbles?
Not even bubbles. Where's the taste?
I know.
Is there something wrong with it?
I guess do kings not? I mean, this is the land of kings. Do they not like taste in beer?
I guess kings don't. They drink wine.
There you go.
I think that's the problem.
Yeah.
Well, you can. Maybe there was some taste. I'm not sure. Maybe it got lost on the way over here. If they even ship it, but
I don't know. It has a pant on this, so they had to have made it here.
Wow, that's even worse then.
So
So they have a recipe for beer that it'll give you the effects of beer, but it won't actually taste like beer. So actually, it's amazing. So maybe that's what makes it the king of beer.
Oh, there you go. Maybe.
Yeah.
Yeah. It doesn't taste like beer, but makes you feel like you drank a beer.
Yeah. So
do you feel like you drank a beer? You've only had sips. Is it getting better or worse, by the way, now that you're in your 3rd?
It is getting better and better.
Because it started so low to begin with?
Yeah. But now it's getting a little worse.
The more we talk about it,
yeah,
it's like a roller coaster.
it is. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So
many emotions.
Are you gonna, when we turn this off, are you gonna drink the rest of this?
Yeah.
And there's another cold one, and then there's 4 that aren't cold. Do I need to put them in the fridge for you?
Yeah.
So what you're telling me basically is you have 0 standards.
No, but I think here's the deal. So
Yeah.
it is not very tasty, but it doesn't taste bad. Because
Okay.
it has so little taste.
So your beer can be indifferent, and that's okay with you.
just
like-
if that's what you have in the fridge.
I do have some good beer in the fridge. No, I don't. This is all I have. All right. Okay, we're gonna say goodbye now.
Bye.
Thank you for this very special Try It On Tuesday with Martin from Norway drinking the king of beers.
Go try it. You'll be amazed.
Do not. Bye-bye. All right, that was a special Try It On Tuesday where I tortured a friend with American beer, which I do not think is very good, to be honest. Martin seemed to think it was okay. I've given him the excess beer, and it will not be in my house. I promise. Only Danish beer is here. So, all right, we went through kind of leasing and gas and these other things, but now let's get to the meat of this interesting concept of what it costs to buy a car, which is when the registration tax stuff really kicks in. So I'm looking down a little because I have a board here with all the numbers. I want to make sure I say them correctly. So if I were to buy this Nissan Juke that I leased, first of all, I need to put around 47,000 krona down. The reason why is basically you can borrow the money that the registration tax is for. So the cost of the registration taxes and moms, the 25% VAT stuff, you can take as a loan. So there's no capital in that at all. So they require you to have a pretty high 20% down payment in order to help compensate a bit from the fact that part of your loan is the car and part of it is these taxes. That's a huge difference because in the US you can get a car with like $1,000 loan, which is like 6,000 krona or something. You don't need to put down that much money in order to walk away with a car. Basically, if you have good credit, you can just hardly pay anything and you might be able to get no down payment in some cases. So that's a huge difference, is that down payment is quite large. In this case would have been 47,000 krona. So That would then equate to around 3,600-ish krona a month in a car payment for 5 years, 60 months. And that means over the course of the 5 years, I'd be paying around 270,000 krona for that car, or 43,000 US dollars. Okay, now if I look at that same, or the kick, again, the Nissan Kicks in the US, like I mentioned before, I would first put less money down on the car, because again, it's not common to put that much money as a down payment. And that then would turn into a monthly payment of around 433 US dollars a month, or around 2,700-ish Danish krona a month in the US. Over the course of the loan, that would turn into 163,000 krona, or around 25,900 US dollars. To get the same-ish car, again, I couldn't compare the exact car because I don't have the Juke in the US, but a similarly priced and equipped car from Nissan would be 25,900 US dollars versus 43,000 here in Denmark. That means that it's 66% more to buy that same car in Denmark versus the US. I think that's an important thing, and this is where it might be controversial, because here's the deal. The value of the car is less here. So there is some incentive to lower the cost of the car, because the open market adjusts a little bit because the taxes are high. And so the same car, actually, the value of the car minus taxes, minus everything, is actually a little bit less in the US versus here. Less here versus the US, simply because of the fact that, there's knowledge that the tax is going to increase the cost, and the open market has to be a little competitive. So that's why that's 66% more here versus 100 plus more percent. It's because part of it is an adjustment in the value of the car itself. Number one. Number two, you can typically get better interest rates here in Denmark versus the US for a loan. So in the US, it might be like 5-6%. Now, there are times when you can have incentives where it's less. Commonly, though, it might be 4 to 6%, depending on your credit. Here, you might be able to get 2 or 3% for a loan. Over the course of 5 years, that amounts to a little bit more money that you'd be paying in interest in the US versus here in Denmark. So all that together equates to around 66% more for the same car here versus the US. So I think it's important to know, because I hear people throw out like 150% for tax, and and I know that can apply to some things. But in this specific example, taking numbers and adding it up and going through the math and comparing as best I can with similar vehicles between what I'd pay in Illinois with sales tax and everything there versus here, it amounts to around 66% more here. Now, to mention the registration tax, because I think it's important, when you buy a car here, you pay the 25% VAT, and in addition, there's a registration tax. Now, what often doesn't get mentioned is that registration tax is progressive, which means you don't pay 150% on all of the value of the car. For the first 65,000 krona, you pay 25%. Then from 65,000 to 202,000 krona, you'd pay 85%. Then everything over that 202,000 krona, you would pay 150% for. But that applies to more expensive vehicles. But a car like the Juke, in this case, it ended up being around, with moms plus the registration tax, it would have been 106% in tax for that car, because of the progressive way that the taxes work. There's also incentives for like fuel efficiency and safety features and things. It gets super complicated, and it's hard to decipher, absolutely. But when you take the math up and add it all up, it ends up being 106% for this specific car. And I want to point that out because I know people like to shock and say 150%, but that's not reality for most cars that an average person would get. In this case, it's 106%. I'm not saying that's nothing. That is a ton. You're paying double the cost of the car in taxes, for sure. And that is super annoying. And I'm not saying that it isn't, but it's also a big difference to say 150% versus 106%. That's 44% difference in cost, which is significant in the value of a car. So I wanted to point out that it's not quite 150%. The progressive way that the taxes work makes it less, unless you're buying like a Lamborghini, which I don't think I'm ever going to be buying. So that won't ever apply to me. So a type of car I'd buy is 106%. Totally stinks. Absolutely. Not arguing there. But to be accurate, that's the amount of tax between the registration tax and the VAT that I would pay for that specific car. Again, pointing back to what I mentioned before, in the US, I would have had 2 cars and I may have had 2 car payments. So I might be paying twice here, but I have half the car. And if I have 2 car payments in the US, then I'm actually in my monthly budget in some situations might be paying the same as what I pay here. So again, from my perspective, moving here, thinking about what I paid per month for cars and gas and everything, it's not that different for us. But I absolutely understand that if you don't have that to compare to, it's annoying and it's different and it's expensive. And I'm not saying that I'm a fan at all. But I wanted to accurately say at least what it would be in this case, 106% more in tax because of the progressive way that the registration tax works. Also, I know that it was more in the past, but that's not what it is today. This is what it is today. Also, there's actually ways of getting like green vehicles that have very little green tax for the moment and some other incentives. And by the way, driving to work can be incentives, and there's other things that can help reduce some tax stuff. But I don't drive to work. It doesn't really apply to me, so I'm not going to get into all those details. So it's possible to get some level of tax relief depending on how you use your car, or if you get like an electric vehicle. So I just wanted to say those things, and I have no doubt there's going to be a heated debate in comments. And I'm not saying that I think it's fantastic that it's so much to pay in tax, for sure. But I also wanted to at least look realistically at this specific car. What would the tax have been? Because I wanted to know if it was 150%, because I had no idea. When I came here, I thought we're never going to get a car, and then I decided to get a lease to avoid paying so much in that tax. But it was interesting for me to kind of decipher and see what it really is in the end, what it would have been for that same car. It was less than I thought it would be, still more than I'd like. But if I end up staying here long term, the cost of buying a car, even though it costs more, is better than continuously having to have a lease every 3 years, because then you're paying that lease cost over and over again every 3 years, new down payment, monthly payments, and it never goes away. So it might have been better at some point, if I'm going to stay here long term, to buy a car in order to get out of a situation that I have to keep paying for a lease, or maybe buying a used car, which would be different in value, and the registration tax is a little different. All right, so that's a lot of information, but it took a while to put this together because I was wanting to make sure I got the right details from the dealership that was helping me with the car that I leased. I wanted to get my car, which I now have. Super excited. I like it. Ready to take some road trips on it, and visit more parts of Denmark that are a little easier to get to by car. But there you go. That's kind of the breakdown of cars. And I mean, I guess the summary too to mention is in the U.S., you basically pay just sales tax from whatever state that you're in, and that's the tax. I mean, there's always other things like registration fees that are like just hundreds of dollars, and transportation costs to get the car and all that, but that stuff exists here too. But the biggest thing is it's the sales tax might be 7%, 8%, 5%, 4%, depending on where you live. It's different from state to state, and that's the only tax really that you're going to pay for the car. And the cost of license plate is just $150 or something, depending on where you're at. And so that's definitely a lot different than 106% in the case of this Juke that I would have been paying in tax here. But there you go. It is what it is, and we are leasing, and it's, from our standpoint, affordable compared to where we were before, and our needs for cars and everything being so different. And we're happy to have a vehicle because some of the things we do just require longer driving and stuff. So, all right, that's it. That is the car episode. So we got to talk about cars, my new lease, gas, tried on Tuesday with horrible Budweiser. I'm going to say this really fast before we end, which is, goodness, we're at the very end of the line here from the Euro Championship. So I cannot wait for the match. For me, tomorrow night, now it'll be tonight after I post this, to see what Denmark does. Hopefully they beat England and we're in the final. We'll see. Fingers crossed. I don't want to say any more and jinx anything, but we are so pumped. It's amazing to be in Denmark, to be watching this stuff, and be living in a city, a country that's like rocking it. It's so exciting, so exciting. I cannot wait. It's been so much fun. It's been a blast. So we're just having such a good time, and it's going to be sad when the championship is over, because it's been... the first days we didn't have games, I didn't know what to do with myself. I've gotten so used to watching matches all the time. So, fingers crossed that our next video, we have some interesting updates on what happened with Denmark. And in that next video, we actually went to the Medieval Center down in Lolland. So stay tuned and look forward to that. It was a really cool experience. You get to see Miranda do some sword fighting. and we got to see some jousting, and just Miranda got to pull the trebuchet thing, launch a big cement ball into the water. It was a really, really cool day, and that's going to be on this Friday. But for now, I've done a lot of talking, and I need to get some dinner and get ready for a match. Not the Denmark match, but the other one is coming up in a few minutes. So I'm going to say goodbye. Brisket, who's sitting next to me patiently, he's going to say goodbye. We'll see you later.
Do you sell propane tanks?
Yeah, I got propane tanks up back. Just grab them.